Okay, so right before we get to chapter 11 and 12, I want to just, something came to my mind during the break where I think I'm starting to see the guiding thread here. Yeah, this is good. Okay. So, the main theme is Havel, which means the ungraspable, right? That's how we're going to translate it. So we saw in the first few chapters we studied the beginning, right? How we cannot grasp onto what we want in the material world. We have to learn to receive it, right? Perhaps here is the equivalent, what we just talked about the hour. We cannot grasp intellectually where we are to go and what path we are to follow in life, but we can receive an insight. Are you seeing here the idea? I think this is really, really helpful. Just like we receive happiness, right, in the material world, that was the lesson of chapter 2. Perhaps also when it comes to finding our way in the world, making important decisions, should I marry this person or that person, do this career or that career, should I, travel here, travel there? Perhaps here too, we need to stop trying to grasp or get stuck, right, in one way of seeing things, right? So this is a way of grasping, right? When we have a worldview that we cannot let go of, this is the problem with a lot of us, why we don't grow intellectually, spiritually. We have a worldview we cannot let go of, right? This was the problem of Job. He was stuck. I mean, it wasn't that he was doing anything wrong. He was stuck in a limited worldview. And a lot of us are stuck in a limited worldview, are stuck in a limited bubble of what is good, what is evil, and what should I do, what I shouldn't do. We were taught, don't date this person, don't go to this place, don't travel to this country, don't do this job, right? So a lot of us have a hard time. We are still grasping onto these constructs of how we should live, right? And the invitation here is, again, to let go, to surrender, and to receive our destiny, right, from a deeper place than those constructs, right? Remember when we did Genesis 11 and 12, and we saw how, unlike Babel, right, who make a name for themselves, Abraham receives, God gives him a name. God makes his name great, right? So this is the idea that our destiny, our path, we cannot control. Where is the right turn? What is the right turn to make? And in a way, we have to receive this wisdom from outside of ourselves. I think this is what it means to fear God, is the ability to receive direction from outside of ourselves, and then even if it makes no sense, to follow it. Okay, so let me write this down in the chat, right? Perhaps, right, the fear of God that we've been talking about is, first of all, needs the letting go of our way of thinking, of our constructs, whether they're moral or whatever, right? And be open to receiving, right, a direction. I can't spell receiving. Receiving a direction or orientation from outside of ourselves, right? And this can be in the form of advice, right? It can be in the form of a situation which you feel is calling you out of where you were, right? Or it can be the voice of God, who knows, right? So that's the idea. Are you seeing a little more clearly how Solomon is really, it sticks together? It's always the same idea. Are you seeing more clearly a little bit what's going on? You put your hand in the screen if you're with me. Rudolph, go ahead, sorry.
So in the beginning of today's class, my brethren, Steve Williams, had mentioned Stephen Covey. And it triggered a thought, because Stephen Covey is, for those of you who may not be familiar with him, a figure of the 90s when there was a so-called paradigm shift in corporate America, when we changed our way of thinking of each other, and when we infused nouveau ideas of communicating with each other. I pulled it up on the screen here, and I poked around in it earlier, and there is nothing earth-shaking about Stephen Covey's book of 7 Habits of Most Successful People, which is most probably one of his most well-known works. But it does say that it emphasizes a return to principles of values in order to achieve change in our lives. It's a step-of-step model of including other people's ideas,
Yeah.
of reaching out, of speaking, of communicating. Learning new habits is not easy. It takes time and practice. For most of us, it's a big task, and yada, yada, yada. He goes on and sells his book. So with all this in mind, I think, Steve, you were onto something very, very important. That, the buzzword of the time back then, that paradigm shift, is something we all struggle with over and over and over again in our lives, because lives change, the world changes, paradigms change, and we change. We absorb more wisdom, we grow more, we question more things around us, and that this occurs, all of us are in different stages of life. So unless we communicate with each other, and unless we exchange ideas how, this guy over here can make it work with Mademoiselle Ducan or Hallie Butterfield or Will Edmonds, people who I absolutely don't know, we're starting to communicate. And through this communication, we find bits and pieces that we can incorporate into our own ideas. And that's how I see it.
Ah, you understood so well. That's it. That's what I've been trying to say. Thank you. I hope you guys took notes. This is Covey and Ecclesiastes are both here talking about the ability to be flexible and change your paradigm and receive from the outside your calling or your destiny rather than right. Yes, I love it. That's great. That's okay, great. Anybody want to add to this? I think this is really what's going on, is and realizing that sometimes this calling will feel at odds with what we're used to thinking is the right thing to do. Let's imagine a lot of you are going through this, right? You choose a career that your parents don't approve of, right? And like you want to be an artist or whatever, and they want you to be a medical doctor. Right? This is a classic, right? So you feel called to do something which is going against everything that your family stands for, or you're dating someone, right? Who's, here I am. you can send your parents to me once the damage is done, right? But you're dating someone that your family disapproves because it's different ethnicity or race or religion or culture or social status, right? And you feel this is your truth, but it's going against everything that you know to be right, that you have been taught is right. Ecclesiastes is inviting us to not hesitate, right? That we should not let ourselves be limited, right, by a construct, right? We should always try to go beyond and beyond and the beyond again. That's the idea. Okay, I think I made it even more complicated. Let's go to chapter 11, because y'all look like you're about to collapse. So chapter 11 is very cheerful. I kind of like chapter 11. Watch this. Let's go there right now. I find it incredibly reassuring. Okay, where is it? Yes, chapter 11. Okay, let's read a few passages and then we'll comment them. So here's the first one. Send your bread forth upon the waters, for after many days you will find it. Distribute portions to 7 or even to 8, for you cannot know what misfortune may occur on earth. If the clouds are filled, they will pour down. If a tree falls to the south, right, or to the north, the tree will stay where it falls. If one watches the wind, he will never sow. If one observes the clouds, he will never reap. Okay, what is he talking about? Anybody know what he's trying to tell us? Anybody have a guess as to what's going on here? What is the invitation here? What is the invitation? Still in line with what we've been doing so far. What letting go is he asking of us here? Y'all don't know? Okay, let me help you. So I'll start with agricultural metaphors, right? He who watches the wind will never sow. So you're about to sow, right? And you're constantly looking like, wait a second, I need to find the perfect moment, and it seems there's going to be a wind. And remember, if there's too much wind, it takes your seed and scatters it away from the field, right? So you want to be careful to sow when there's not too much wind. So you're watching the wind, and you're watching the wind so much that you never end up sowing. Or the person, he's watching the clouds, he will never sow clouds, right? So if it's raining, you don't want to start reaping because it's going to ruin the harvest, right? So you want to make sure you do it at the right time, and you're watching the clouds so much you end up not reaping. How does this sound familiar? What is he talking about? Of course, we're not farmers, right? But what kind of attitude is he criticizing here in a very unbiblical way? And un-Greek way too. Olivera, go ahead.
Like indecisiveness, like are you taking too long to do something? So, for example, if it's for a relationship, you're dating this person, then you date the other person, and nobody's never good enough, and then you date like everybody, and then it's never.
Yes, and why do you hesitate? What is making you hesitate? Out of what virtue are you?
You don't have certainty. You don't know for sure that that's the one.
Yes, you want to be wise. You want to make the right decision. This is prudence, right? You want to be careful. You don't want to do it at the wrong time, but you're so careful, you don't do anything, right? Rudolph, continue. You're muted.
Sorry about that. So you all may have that image of me sitting in my office in Midtown Manhattan. I'm actually a farm boy from the deep center of Germany, and I grew up on a little farm, and I know how to sow seed. And when you had strong winds and it went against the direction as to where you wanted the seed to land, you had to be flexible and change your direction. And that's what I see in it. If you want the seed to land where you want something to grow, you don't fight the wind. You use the wind as a tool.
Wow, that was so enlightening. Can you explain the clouds and the reaping while we're at it?
I leave that up to you.
See, I wasn't sure about that. Is it that we have to wait for, I'm not, but let's stay with your metaphor because that one I think is clear to us. I love that. Okay, so here's another way to interpret the passage, right? As Rudolph is saying, sometimes you can't have too rigid expectations as to where your plan will go. You have to walk and be willing to move along with what opens up, right? So flexibility, right? I like that. Very good. Anybody else want to try this? Okay. Yes, Christodoulou, go ahead.
Oh, I think it's interesting that the folly here is like the assumption of yourself above God, or putting yourself at the same level as God, that you know as much as he does, that you know what is right in your life more than he does. And like, in some sense, you have to trust like that if the wind is blowing against you, you have to walk the other way.
Yes, very good. Is this where we have the thing about the verse we read before about you do not know where the wind goes? Somebody? I'm tired too. So is that where the
11:5? It's 11:5.
Thank you. Okay, 11:5, and this Bible is written so dreadfully small. Yes, just as you do not know. This is what you're saying, Christodoulou, right? Just as you do not know the way of the wind and what happens in the womb, so you cannot foresee the actions of God. So this is kind of an invitation here to take some risks, right? And not be worried about the outcome because the ways of God are mysterious, right? So I kind of find this passage in its recklessness reassuring in the sense that this is an invitation to not be afraid to in other words, in life, sometimes you don't know completely if a course of action is right? Sometimes you're not sure if this is the right school for you, or if this is the right career, or if this is the right partner. The text is saying, walk, keep moving, do not become paralyzed, because only when you walk will things begin to open up, right? God can lead someone only when they're walking. If you're sitting still, trying to figure it all out by yourself. There's no leading that can take place, right? So I like to think about this passage as make any decision, even the wrong one, because as you begin walking, then the leading can begin to take place, right? And the doors can close and open. I'm not saying rush into marriage and marry this horrible person. I'm saying take a step. See where it goes. Is it working? Is it not working? Take another step. Is the door closing? Is the door opening? Right? But if you're paralyzed, I can't ever make this decision because I don't know if it's the right person. You will never know until you take a step. This is again the walk of faith, right? This is the idea in life. Let us not become paralyzed because we do not see clearly. You will never see clearly about anything ahead of time. Let me say that again, drill it in your mind. You will never see clearly about anything in your life ever. You will never know clearly if they're the right one for you. You will never know clearly if you should have kids or not. You will never know clearly if this is the right profession. You will know as you begin to walk into it. And as you begin to walk into it, believe me, life will kick in and close and open if you are flexible enough to follow the maze that life will create for you, right? So this is, for me, very interesting text. Basically, the text is saying, cast your bread, it will come back. In other words, don't be afraid to stumble. Life will catch you, right? Let me say that again. Don't be afraid to stumble because life itself will catch you, right? I mean, I feel like when I read this whole book, right, I feel like there is within the darkness of and the nihilism of Ecclesiastes, there's such a constant thread of trust that I'm seeing throughout the text, which mesmerizes me because he seems like such a loser, right? When you're listening to him talk, right? And yet you're seeing beneath everything, there is a kind of steady thread of trust in life or in God, right? And meaning you have this trust which enables you to surrender and relax. I think this is the main meaning of the text. Because there is this underlying sense that the Creator is in control, we can relax and we can rest into life. We don't have to grasp, we don't have to know, and we don't have to fear. Those are the three things, right? I think the Ecclesiastes is telling us, relax. You don't have to grasp after this. The Creator will give you. You don't have to figure it out. You will receive a wisdom. And now you don't have to be paralyzed with fear. The Creator will catch you, right? These are the three lessons I'm seeing, and they're so luminous, right? And so hidden within the darkness of the text. And yet I sense this is the guiding thread. Let me say it again so you can write it down, right? Don't be afraid of not getting what you want, right? The Creator will provide. Number two, don't be trying to figure it all out. You will receive wisdom in due time. And finally, don't be afraid of making a mistake, right? Life will catch you, right? Don't be afraid of making the wrong decision and stay paralyzed. Just enter, right? So I'm seeing here again, right? I mean, for me, the overwhelming message of the book of Ecclesiastes is a message of grace, right? God will provide. God will give you direction, and God will catch you, right? And of course, you can look at this in a completely secular way too, right? Which is how the Stoics saw life, right? And there was in Stoicism such a deep trust in the intelligence of nature that the same thing, right? You don't have to grasp. It will come to you in its own time. You don't have to figure it out. Be still and you will receive the wisdom. And finally, you don't have to be afraid because eventually all things, when Paul says, when all things work together for the good, this is a Stoic saying. It didn't come in Paul's mind, right? So extraordinary text, right? In my view, when it comes to this kind of deep serenity in the midst of this chaos and grappling. I'm seeing here, if you ever know the music of Bach, right? If you've ever listened, I'm sorry to bring something that nobody has listened to, but those of you who've listened to Bach or haven't, you should. It's very chaotic music, but underneath you feel this kind of inner stability. inner trust, inner serenity. I believe this is the book of Ecclesiastes. This is the secret subliminal message of the book of Ecclesiastes. Beneath the chaos, the nihilism, the despair, you have this underlying trust and quietness where you don't have to be afraid to relax into life, right? Okay, let's have some discussion. Rudolph and then Williams.
Look, in the beginning of the preamble of our class today, my classmates mentioned traveling and going to Europe and cited France as one of their destinations. And, you know, in France, and you, Professor, have mastered at Sorbonne, you know that it happens in France more so than in many other European countries, that there is an understanding within the French culture that there has to be joie de vivre. And joie de vivre is nothing else but, you know, the joy of conversation, the joy of, before we were saying, and the food is excellent. Well, it's not about the quality of the food, it's about the joy of eating with others. It's the joy of anything. It's really, it can be seen as the joy of everything, wherever you go, whatever you do, comprehensive joy as a philosophy of life. And, you know, I don't know how to express this better than the French. If you travel Canada, Montreal will show you the same face. Many other Canadian cities are very American, very lower 48. But if you go to Montreal, you really have a feeling of being included in a culture that's all inclusive and celebrates life. Every day, from breakfast to going to bed, there is a celebration.
Yes, well said. Thank you for the publicity for my country. Yes. And I would add to that, you're so right. Book of Ecclesiastes, one of the leitmotifs, one of the repeating themes is, you know, enjoy yourself, enjoy yourself. The idea that you can really, because of this underlying safety net in a way, right? Because the creator is in control, you can now truly enjoy yourself. You don't have to be stressed, trying to figure things out or trying to make things work or being afraid of taking a decision, right? You can relax, and only because you have this deep subliminal trust in the creator can you really eat and drink and enjoy, right? So I don't know what the French would say about that because they're a largely secular country, right? But I think they've really stumbled upon this truth, right? This idea that enjoyment is a sign. I don't think they would agree with me, but enjoyment is a sign that you are in tune with the creator. I'll tell you a story that goes along with that, since we have so much time. Yes. And then I'll get some of your questions. So this is a story by Martin Buber. I really like this story. Martin Buber is a Jewish philosopher from the 20th century. And he wrote this, this is a Hasidic story. It's a story from the literature of the 19th century Judaism. And so in this literature, there's a story about a rabbi who was very, very famous, a very, very righteous rabbi. And he happened to be best friends with the gangster of the town. So this is the equivalent of a rabbi, I don't know, being friends with, who is the main gangster here? I don't even know. But like with Al Capone or something. Y'all know Al Capone, or I'm the only one who knows Al Capone? Everybody knows Al Capone? Okay, thank you. All right. So this is so his disciples, right? The disciples of the rabbis, it boggled their mind that they would spend so much time together drinking and talking. And they're like, Rabbi, how can you be friends with this sinner? And the rabbi answers and he says, yeah, I know he's a sinner, but he's so joyful. I love his joy. And so each time I'm with him, it cheers me up. And so for me, this is why this is going to be my best friend. So when you interpret the story a little bit, you realize that actually the rabbi is saying, this man has understood something that I haven't, because the rabbi struggled with melancholy, with depression, and this man is joyful. And the message between the lines is that this sinner is closer to God than the rabbi, because this sinner is capable of joy, meaning that this sinner has an implicit sense of trust in God, has an implicit trust in God. You cannot be joyful unless you have an implicit trust that everything is going to be okay, that the universe will catch you, or that God will provide, right? But it doesn't have to be explicit. The fact that you're joyful says that you have this connection, right? And the rabbi is telling his disciples basically that I am not as joyful as this man, and therefore he is closer to God than I am, right? So it's a very beautiful story. And I think Ecclesiastes is saying that, right? In as much as you're capable of enjoying yourself, it shows that you've tapped into the metaphysical truth that the Creator will catch you, right? And you cannot be joyful otherwise. You're just going to be frenetic, right? Trying to be joyful, right? Like the hedonist. He's saying the moment you relax into life is the moment you have attuned yourself to this deep truth that life will catch you, right? That's the idea. So I guess the French have an implicit trust in God. They would hate me to say this, but okay, great. William, sorry, we've kept you waiting a lot. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I was just gonna say, like, from what I was gathering, it seems like it's a balance between us trusting in God and understanding that, like, regardless it'll work out, and then on top of that, it's about finding a devotion in yourself to have like no plan sometimes and just walk through it, like you said, walking through the darkness. But also then it's like, but it's also understanding that like sometimes you're just gonna fall into things and it's just gonna work itself out. Really like in the best examples like Kramer, where he just falls into like money, or he just falls into whatever situation like a maniac, and it just works out at the end, like a sitcom, basically.
That's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea, right? Not be afraid to find oneself in a big so-called detour in life, or in a hole or a pit or whatever you stumble in. This is part of the journey, right? To kind of embrace joyfully, oh, I'm in a pit. Okay, let's see. Why am I here? What's going on? Right? So this is kind of really a very Nietzschean approach to really, it's a love of life. That's what I'm seeing in this text so powerfully hidden, right, is this love of life. Great. Anybody else want to add anything before we get into brief the conclusion of Ecclesiastes 12? Okay, Williams, is that still a hand, or?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. All right. So now that we've reached this state, right, we go to chapter 12, and look what a downer it is. It's like we've reached this amazing state of not knowing, of, relaxation, surrender, taking risks. And all of a sudden you get to 12, and it's like, it says this. So, sorry, last part of 12. The conclusion. A further word. Notice, by the way, this further word, against them, my son, be warned. The making of many books is without limit, and much study is wearying of the flesh. The sum of the matter, conclusion, when all is said and done, fear God and observe his commandments, for this applies to all mankind, that God will call every creature to account for everything unknown, be it good or bad. Okay, now what's happening? Are you seeing the anticlimax? Are you seeing the being booted back into the Father's house? Right? Are you seeing what's happening? We just were floating around in the mother's house, right? In this beautiful attitude of receptivity and not knowing, and not fearing. And we were kind of, in this beautiful vibe. And now it's like, yo, actually what you need to do. And the conclusion is you need to keep God's commandments, right? That's what this text is about. So what do you think? Is this what, what's happening? Christo Dulu, go ahead.
I think it's a reminder to be okay with your transgressions and be okay with falling, but don't fall on purpose. Don't throw yourself down the stairs. You still have to walk straight. You still have to walk, like a person.
Yes, this is kind of like an addition. By the way, Ecclesiastes did not write this, right? This is a later addition. Or, well, let me not say that like that. Some scholars think that Ecclesiastes did not write this, and it's a later addition. And I kind of agree with them, honestly. But it could still be Ecclesiastes. And one student said it very well in the last time we studied this. He said, okay, y'all, in case you didn't understand a word of what I said, just let's go back to the basics. Fear God and keep his commandments, right? So it could be that. It could be like, boy, in case you got lost over here and you're now trying to go transgress, and do all these crazy things. Here, let me wrap it up for you, simpleton, right? So that you can understand, fear God and keep the commandments. That's the basic idea, right? So you could see it like that, or you could see it like an addition from a scribe who, I don't like to do that though. I prefer to see it less. I don't like to speculate about who wrote what. So if it is Ecclesiastes, it could just be, just in case you didn't understand a word, here is the simple version of what I said. And it's, it's kind of in line, although I still think we are booted back in the Father's house. And I tend to agree with some scholars that this might be a later addition to the text. One of the reasons I say this is that, remember, Ecclesiastes concludes in verse... yeah, okay, here's my argument. All right, I'll give you my argument why I think this is not written by Ecclesiastes. First of all, Ecclesiastes just finished in chapter 12, verse, okay, these numbers, verse 9? Yeah, 8. He concludes with Havel, like he always does, so it's over, no more Havel. And then you have in verse 9 a further word, because Kohelet was a sage. So this is not talking about Ecclesiastes. This is not Ecclesiastes himself talking. This is a further word by maybe the same author, but it's not Ecclesiastes. Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Is everybody seeing what I'm seeing? Right. So this is, maybe it's the same Solomon writing, sure, but it's not. Solomon is no more the mouthpiece of Ecclesiastes here, right? Or he is now bringing a different perspective. And then it's a Father's house perspective. So the way I'm seeing this is that it is not part of the discourse of Ecclesiastes. I'm fine with Solomon writing both, right? Solomon could have written the discourse of Ecclesiastes and then added this little postscript for the morons who didn't understand anything he said, or to balance the mother's house with the Father's house. But I'm pretty sure that the discourse ended in verse 8, when he concludes, as he usually does, everything is Hevel, Havlim, Hakol, Hevel is the typical conclusion, and we have no more Hevel here. So this, for me, so I hope, Olivera, this is a satisfactory explanation of the ending, is an addition either by Solomon or someone else. I'll go with Solomon, but it's simply, it's not a commentary on what we have just done. It's maybe a postscript. So yeah, anybody else want to say anything? Are you seeing what was I convincing with my thing? Olivera, are you satisfied? No, speak to us.
It's really, it's just, it's a very Sunday turn. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm satisfied, but I see where it turned.
Yeah, so I want to make sure you guys all understand. It's a turn which is not in the text. This is a postscript for sure, because the text ended with everything is Havel, and then this guy is talking about Ecclesiastes in the third person, so it's an ending. So we wonder, why are we getting booted back in the Father's house? So either Solomon got afraid of what he wrote, and he's trying to make sure everybody doesn't fall into transgression, or it's somebody else who wrote this because they couldn't stand the message, right? The mother's house message that was just spoken. But for sure, this is not, in my view, this is not part of the book or of the narrative of Ecclesiastes. This is an addition to kosherize, right? To make kosher, to sanitize in case people get lost, right? That's how I would see it. Okay. Great, so we are out of time. I will stop the recording.